So welcome to the webinar. This is Anne Rolfe of Mentoring Works, and our webinar today is Mentoring, Maintaining the Momentum. And I'm very excited to be bringing this topic to you today. It's one that people have a lot of interest and a lot of questions about, and I'll try to answer those questions as we go through. And I hope you can see the picture that I've got up here. It's a lovely little two-person sailboat, and I use that picture to just demonstrate the idea that you need to maintain momentum in a mentoring program if it's going to work, because just like a sailboat, when the wind blows, it projects it along. But once the wind stops, the momentum actually doesn't carry it very far. And so I want you to hold that idea in your mind. You need to keep up the puff, if that's one way of putting it, to actually keep on making an effort to keep your mentoring program moving along, because the risk of mentoring fizzling out is very high if there's no strategy to maintain the momentum. If you've invested time, energy and money in launching a mentoring strategy, you can't afford to see it fail. Having built high expectations of mentoring, you need to be able to deliver. So, how do you keep mentoring a high priority? How do you keep people engaged when they have so many other demands on their time? And how do you ensure sustained success of your mentoring program? These are the questions we'll be exploring in this webinar. I started nearly 30 years ago in the finance sector, and in the 80s I began helping senior managers who were retrenched to move on in their career and lives and build new careers. 15 years ago I began to focus on mentoring as the key strategy for people who want to progress their careers. Some of the programs I've been involved in more recently have helped build safer workplaces, increased profitability in small businesses, and provided career development and leadership skills. And even though priorities often shift in this climate, one thing never changes. For organisations, people really are our greatest asset. And while most just say that, if you offer mentoring, you show you really mean it. Strategically, mentoring is a cost-effective method for attracting, retaining and developing people if you do it right. I guarantee you'll leave this webinar with practical information you can use. And I have a special offer at the end of the webinar that will add even more value for you. So, just to make sure that you get the most out of our time together, I know some of you have been on webinars with me before, but for those of you who may not have, just let me give you a quick overview. So webinars are interactive, and you'll get the most out of this one if you're active rather than passive. So be sure to have a pen and paper to make notes and write down questions. And that's especially important today because we will be doing some brainstorming, and I'm really looking for a lot of contribution from all of you on the webinar today. So make sure now, if you haven't got it, go grab it quickly, pen and paper, so that you can jot down notes and questions. Now, the webinar is being recorded so that you can watch and listen again later. You can ask questions at any time. I know some of you actually sent in questions when you registered, and I've made a note of some of those so I can respond at various times through the webinar. But if you think of something at any time, you can ask a question. A couple of ways you can do that. First of all, you can put your hand up. You can see the little hand icon, hopefully, on your control panel. Just click on that and your hand will go up. I will see it. And just like in any face-to-face seminar, once I see a hand up, as soon as I can pause, I will do so and invite you to ask your question. If you have a microphone, I will switch on that microphone so that you can speak to us all. If you don't have a microphone, then you can type in your question. And type in a question at any time. I'll be keeping an eye on the question panel and pause and respond as soon as I can. With asking questions, if you're typing something in, normally I'll say your name to acknowledge that it's your question, but if you wanted to ask a question and remain anonymous, just type the word, or part of a word at least, anon, A-N-O-N, at the beginning of your question, and I will respect your privacy. They tell me if you have a headset, you'll get a better result also on the webinar. At the moment, everyone who's online is muted to cut out any background noise. But during the webinar, I will call on people who have their hand up and switch on those microphones so that you can ask a question or make a comment. Because we're recording the webinar and it may be accessed by others who visit the website, just be mindful that you're speaking in a public domain. Rest assured that I'll only call on you if you have your hand up. I have to pause for a moment because I have a cold and I need a quick blow of my nose. So I'm going to mute this so I don't come across the air. Just 1 second, bear with me. Okay, sorry about that. I've got a little sniffle here, so that's one good thing. We're online, so you can't catch my germs. So rest assured I won't call on you unless you've got your hand up, but I do hope that you have brought your curiosity, your experience and ideas to share with us all today. So on to our topic, mentoring, maintaining the momentum. Typically, mentoring programs start with some fanfare. The strategic value to the organisation and personal benefits of mentoring are usually promoted quite heavily. Participants, advocates and champions are recruited. People are keen and well prepared to enjoy an effective mentoring experience. But everyone is busy. Competing demands on our time and attention can mean that despite early enthusiasm, mentoring doesn't remain a high priority. So let's find out the sorts of things that you do already to maintain the momentum. So I'm going to bring up a poll now, and if you've used these before, if you've been on the webinar before, you'll understand that you should be seeing on your screen a number of responses coming up. Now you can choose more than one, but I'd like you to click on the things that you're already doing to maintain the momentum of your program. So sorts of things you can choose: a documented action plan for the duration of your program. I strongly recommend you have one of those. A mentoring coordinator responsible for the program. Regular contact and two-way participant communication. Events or activities for participants, and help and ongoing support available. So I'm seeing those votes coming in. About half of you have voted already. Just give you a couple of seconds more because there's a lot of choices there. You can choose more than one response. Okay, about 15 seconds more, and then I'll close the poll and share the responses. Almost everyone seems to have. Okay. I'm going to close that poll right now. There, it's closed, and now I'm going to share the responses. Okay, so those should be coming up on your screen right now. So just over half of you have a documented action plan for the duration of your mentoring program. So what I'd suggest to you is that those of you who don't already have that, maybe one of your actions from today is to look at putting together an action plan, putting together like a calendar. I actually use a diary system, and it's on my computer, and I can actually schedule things to come up as a reminder with an alarm to tell me what I need to do today. The good old-fashioned paper diary, I still use one of those as well, and I frequently write my notes in that. Whatever system you want to use, I strongly recommend, and you might use today as a prompt. You can brainstorm a bunch of ideas, take some ideas from this webinar, and think about the things you want to do in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and get yourself a documented action plan, and that would be a step in the right direction. So the majority of you, 67%, so about 2/3, have a mentoring coordinator responsible for managing your program. Again, I strongly recommend there's a designated person or even a team, depending on the size of your program, who are the go-to people, if you like. I'll talk about that more a bit later on, but someone that participants can contact and the next one links in with that. So again, regular contact and two-way participant communication. So that coordinator is the central and focal point of your communication, sending out messages and available to your participants. About the same number have events or activities for participants, and I know I was speaking to Grant, who I think is on the line and I'm sure will share with us later on. Grant, yes, I see you're on the line, Grant, and I know that you'll have something to add about the sorts of events and activities we were speaking about earlier, or in fact last week, that you have for your participants. And the majority, again, 78%, have help and ongoing support available. So a lot of good stuff happening already, and I will invite you to talk about that and share some more specifics of that as we go through today. And, you know, the more things, the more actions you do after the program launch, the better. So the thing I wanted to share with you and get you thinking about too is, let me close this poll completely, put that one away, okay, is that to make mentoring work at any level, you need to make it easy, engaging and enjoyable. So I'd like you to take a sheet of paper. We're going to do some brainstorming here. We'll do a little bit online, and then you can take this away as a tool and do some more later on. So you need a sheet of paper. You need 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines, so that you've now divided your page into 9 cells. And if you write those words in the left-hand column, easy, engaging, enjoyable, a plus sign in the middle column and a minus sign in that right-hand column. So you've got a worksheet. Now we're live, so I'm only going to give you a minute or so to respond to 3 questions that are going to be coming up in a moment. I would like you to type some of your responses in as we go so that I can read them out and share them, or put your hand up if you've got a mic and would like to speak. So the questions I want to ask you, and you'd write these in the left hand under the minus heading of that left-hand column. So what do you think could make mentoring difficult rather than easy for your participants? Why do you think people disengage from the process, and why might they not enjoy it? So again, I want you to type in some responses if you would, so that we can share these. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds of silence while you think about those 3 questions. What could make mentoring difficult for participants? Why do people disengage, and why might they not enjoy it? Looking for your typed in responses or hands going up so that you can speak to us. 30 seconds of silence for you to think coming up now. Okay, so I've got quite a few responses coming in. I see, Grant, you have your hand up. I'm going to unmute you in just a minute. I'm just going to read some of these responses first of all. And David says, lack of contact, direction, shared sense of purpose. Yes, I agree with you there, David. Okay, what else have we got? Jill is saying distance is an issue because they're not face-to-face. Is it Jill also saying hierarchy? I'd like to know more about what you mean there. Jill, if you can expand on that, that point. It's not easy because time and location problems, says Caitlin. Jill, interpersonal differences, not engaging, not enough support, not enough time, not enjoyable because of personality clashes. Hard to keep going due to shift work. Oh, that's Patty. Hi, Patty. Yeah, shift work of the nurses involved in the mentorship program. Jill says, people feel a bit daunted if mentor deemed to be much higher up. Yeah, where there's a great differential between people's status in the organisation. So there's quite a collection of reasons there. Now, going to unmute Grant. Grant, are you there?
Yeah, hi, folks.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Good. I think just before I answer these questions, it might be helpful for the others online to understand I run a mentoring program with volunteer mentors that help small businesses that are just starting up, and so that might put some context around my comments on these three questions. What could make mentoring difficult? And why do people disengage? Oddly enough, some of the reasons have already been stated apply equally to the program that I'm involved with, and that is sometimes you get a personality clash. More often, though, the reason that participants disengage is that the program takes them sometimes to a place, or the mentoring program takes them to a place where they didn't really want to go. And by that I mean our program is designed to try and help these people understand whether their business is commercially viable, and sometimes there's a waking up that that their idea is not commercially viable, and they disengage from the program. A good thing, by the way, simply because the program has taken them to a point where they've realised that their business shouldn't go ahead, and therefore no longer has relevance.
Okay, thank you very much, Grant. And I wonder, even though that's an issue quite specific to your program, and as you said, disengaging from the program in that instance is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I can't think of anything better than knowing that your idea is not viable before you go too much further. Better to find out early than later. So disengaging in that case is not a bad thing. But I'm wondering if that might also be the case in other situations where mentoring takes you to a place you don't want to go, is the way that Grant put that. I wonder if anyone has any comments on anyone else has any comments on that idea. The mentoring takes people, because I've heard this expression before, and sometimes it means that the mentoring is allowing someone to actually confront issues that they perhaps aren't ready to or aren't able to deal with at this time. I'll leave that thought in your minds, and if you want to make a response to that a bit later on, happy to hear your response to that. So what I'm hoping you'll do with this worksheet is see that if we had more time and brainstorming those ideas, even though we're working on the negative side of that balance sheet there, once you understand what some of the issues are, why it might not be easy, why people disengage and why they might not enjoy it, then you can start to work from the other side. And I'd actually be really pleased now to hear from some of you how you do address some of these issues, some of the ways that you do make mentoring easy, engaging and enjoyable. So again, if you'd like to put up your hand or type in, what are some of your strategies to make mentoring easy, engaging and enjoyable? Let's share some of those. What are you doing? Again, I'll give you a couple of seconds of silence. I'll look for your responses and start to read them out as they come in. What are you doing now? Okay, I'm not seeing comments coming in at this time. Oh, yes, I am. Here we go. Let's have a look. Oh, good, good, good. Okay, so Jill's saying we help mentees select a suitable mentor via a meet and greet session. Okay, so the meet and greet session and bios, so perhaps a written biography. Some organisations put those online, some people send them to the participants, and certainly the meet and greet is a great way. Okay, so thanks for that, Jill. Let's go to the next one. So Patty's saying, in order to deal with the shift work, we have adopted a web mentoring tool for remote connection between the mentor and protege. Okay. Grant is saying we have a defined set of agreed outcomes that benefit the participant. Okay, good. Oh. Okay, so Grant again is saying review progress and make adjustments where applicable. And okay, so that's what we've got. Okay, good. So there are some things coming up. I'm going to actually add some more ideas as we go. So I do hope that you'll workshop this, use this tool to workshop perhaps with some colleagues and indeed with participants in your work, in your mentoring program. So I'm going to talk about what I believe are 3 key elements that contribute to sustained success. Firstly, your program structure, your communication strategy, and the sort of ongoing support that you can provide for participants. I'm going to speak about each of these and invite your input in each of these areas too. So I believe a mentoring program, and this next slide's pretty busy, so I'm hoping that that's going to come up okay on your window. I'm not going to speak directly to it, but it's just there to give you some ideas. A program must strike a balance between having enough structure to support mentoring and not so much that people feel overwhelmed or stifled. You need to design a program that helps participants stay on track, provides activities that keep them connected, and has information and resources available over the life of the program. I suggest that you put together a timeline with touch points or milestones or a calendar of events. I think that's an essential part of your program. I think if you put together a calendar of events and you can publish that at the beginning or as part of your launch process. And I also think one of the most important things is to actually schedule regular follow-up by the program coordinator. I think if you start with a contact about a month after the pairs have been introduced to check that they have had their first meeting and assist with any startup issues. If people have problems at the beginning, it's going to be much more difficult to resolve them later on. So a quick check-in with people early in the piece will be a really good investment of your time. I also think that at a predetermined point, pairs should dedicate a meeting to reviewing their mentoring relationship and either committing to continue or deciding to discontinue. If you have group events planned, sequence them at intervals so that they refresh and re-energise participants. I always like to include a midpoint review and a final event for feedback, celebration and closure. So I've got a comment or a question that's come in. Okay. So Grant's also saying, be prepared to change the mentor if the relationships break down. Yeah, and if you, as part of your program, if you get the participants to set an actual date where they're going to review the mentoring relationship, not too far into it, and they're finding that yes, they still want to be involved, but it's not working for the two of them. If you have an exit strategy, an opt-out strategy, whatever you want to call it, and you can replace the partnerships, so link people up with a new partner, that can work well. Now I have got another poll to launch here. Now where is it? Oh dear, I can't find it. Maybe I close the poll and okay. I did have another poll to use here, but I seem to have lost that, unfortunately. Perhaps when I closed the last poll, I accidentally closed this one. But what I was going to ask you was, okay, so, and perhaps you can type in, who actually does follow up participants within the first 6 weeks? Do you ask them to recommit or opt out at some stage? Do you hold midpoint reviews, or run group events during your program? Do you have a final event for celebration? Or is your program not structured? So maybe I'd love to hear something from you on what you actually do to keep the program alive, any of those things, or if your program is completely unstructured, love to hear from you too on that and see how that's going for you. So I'm going to pause for a moment, let you type in your comments. I'm particularly interested in whether you follow up participants, if you have a coordinator who follows up with people within the first 6 weeks. Do you ask them to recommit or opt out? Do you have midpoints or a final review session? Okay, getting some responses coming in. Okay, so Patty's saying because they begin at different times, it's really difficult to find a midpoint for evaluation. Okay, so Patty, your program, people just start whenever they start. So it is difficult to have a midpoint. I send out random emails to check on a few of them, says Patty. Okay, thanks for that. Okay. Okay, so Jill is saying, we do most of those things but don't have an opt-out strategy. We check within the first 6 weeks but don't ask people to recommit. Okay, so that's, okay. Patty's saying, once I know they've concluded the relationship, they have to do a final evaluation for the program. Okay. Grant saying, we do client satisfaction surveys online, face-to-face follow-ups as well, and a web-based system checks frequency of meetings. Okay, so we've got quite a few things happening. I hope it's helping you to hear what other people are doing. So some of the other things that I might mention that occur in other programs is to actually specify the frequency of meetings and publish those in guidelines. I did have a couple of questions on frequency. My personal view is if people aren't in contact once a month, whether that's by phone, face-to-face or email or other system. If you're not in contact once a month, I don't believe you have a mentoring relationship. Some people meet as frequently as weekly or fortnightly, every second week, but certainly I would regard monthly as a minimum. Okay. I also think that mentor forums, either face-to-face or by webinar, to discuss issues and share ideas can be quite useful. Some programs have a mentoree network where the mentees or mentorees, proteges, can connect and build on their mentoring experiences. Some of the other things I've heard of is learning lunches. So people bring their own lunch, brown bag or whatever, and these are short sessions, maybe in the lunchroom. They might have internals, so someone from within your organisation giving a short presentation, or it might be a guest presenter from outside of the organisation. You can also provide information topics on topics generated by the participants, so you could actually survey participants and see what sort of topics are of interest to them, and then find someone, again, within or outside of your organisation who can speak to those topics. I've also run teleconferences back before the days of webinars where mentors actually presented. For example, I had a women's mentoring program where we had top female executives talk about work-life balance, and that was extremely positive response to that. You can use discussion boards or blogs where participants can comment online, and I also know a lot of programs use semi-social events, so a morning tea, afternoon tea, lunch, or even an after-hours get-together. And even though it's a social event, that networking and those informal conversations are often highly valued by participants. And I also think the final event is really good to give closure to your program and to people. Often they decide to continue informally, but it does free up people to mentor others. And I like to see people who've been mentored actually turn around and become mentors in other programs. I'm just seeing a comment from Patty again. At the workshop, I reinforce that if the relationships are not working out, they need to contact me and I will work with them to find a solution. Okay, good. Yeah, I've actually found that people tend to put off asking for help, which is a real shame. And often by the time they put their hand up and say that they've got a problem, it may have gone too far. Now let's have a look at this. We have a mentoring committee touch base with the mentees on a regular basis. Did try a midpoint review but not very successful in getting participant numbers. Yeah, that can be a problem. Have tried to set up a discussion forum but not a lot of take-up. Offer face-to-face follow-up and surveys. Okay, that was from just looking, that was from Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, for that comment. Okay, now Grant saying we have both mentor meetings and more recently client meetings. And question from Katrina, do you recommend mentee presentations at the celebration? Yes, I do. Thanks for bringing that up, Katrina. I think that there are a couple of ways you can do that, and you need to plan it in advance and give people a really good lead time in preparation. Sometimes I've seen a short presentation by a mentor-mentee pair, together or separately, and it could be the pair, a matched pair, or it could be a mentor from a different relationship and a mentee from a different relationship. But I think it's really good to see people who've had success talk about that. And in fact, at a final celebration I went to a month or so ago, there was a very senior executive who came to present gifts and certificates of recognition to mentors and mentorees who'd been in this program. And a mentor-mentoree pair got up and gave a presentation about what they'd achieved, and the senior executive was extremely impressed. And I would suggest probably would not have known just how successful and what the outcomes were had she not been present to hear it firsthand from the participants. So yeah, I do recommend that you get people to present. Okay, I have an anonymous comment here. Is it better to tell people how it will work rather than offer and wait and see? Okay, I'm not quite sure. Is it better to tell people how it will work rather than offer and wait and see if it's taken up? I'm not quite sure I'm understanding that comment. I would, in terms of a midpoint review, I usually tell people at the beginning we're going to have a midpoint review and this is the date, and we're going to have a final event and this is the date, and here's what's involved, and usually people are invited, but basically it's a requisite of the program. Sometimes though, when we're setting up a program, we provide the dates, and part of the selection criteria is that they commit to coming to all of the events that are being provided in that program, so that we know that whatever we put on, we're going to get a pretty good turn-up rate, because it is a demanding resource to actually do. Okay, now some of the questions really relate to this whole idea of communication. And I think that you need to plan a whole communication strategy as you are setting up your program. And this slide that again is quite busy, but I hope you can see, talks about the various aims of communication. So starting out with gaining support, announcing the program, general information, inviting inquiries, responding to inquiries, and then that all-important one that's the topic of our conversation today, which is maintaining commitment. And you can see that I've suggested quite a lot of strategies there. You can follow up with tips, sending out on a regular basis short mentoring tips, just a reminder to actually reinforce the early training, top up the training with short information. You might send out tools to people, or you might have tools on online that they can access, and you send out a reminder to let people know what's there. You can also run what I call master classes. I find a lot of mentors don't like to think that they need to be trained, but a master class that perhaps offers some advanced skills might be more attractive to them. You can't beat that personal contact. So I believe this is another reason why you need a program coordinator, someone who builds a personal relationship with your mentors, in fact acts perhaps as a mentor to mentors. I think that you also need to make sure that you are giving regular feedback, collecting feedback and sharing that, and sharing results. And again, those midpoint and final events can be quite useful as well. One of the things you might do in planning your communication strategy, and some of you will have seen this matrix before, I'm not going to use it today, but I do have a recorded webinar called How to Get the Mentoring Message Across, where we went into a lot of detail about who you need to communicate with, why, what messages you need to get across to them, when you need to communicate, where, so how to place your message. It's almost like a marketing campaign that you place messages throughout the workplace, and how, the various strategies. So if you weren't on that webinar, do go have a look at that. It's on the website. And also, if you did attend that webinar, go back and get your notes out and have a look and see what you've implemented from that. The other thing you want to remember is that mentoring communication needs to be two-way. It's a two-way communication, and so get them talking, and you need to listen to what they say and give them feedback that shows that you've heard and acted on the communication that they're sharing with you. I was going to say that you need constant communication, but that's not actually right. If it's constant, it'll fade into the background of white noise. What you need is some regular communication and other communication at non-regular intervals using a variety of methods. You need to understand that mentors probably need more support than you might think, although they mightn't want to admit it. They don't have much time, so you need to make sure whatever you do with them is worth their while. They do like to share ideas and give input, so you need to use and make sure that mentoring forums work. I'd also suggest that you collect success stories and communicate them with people's permission, of course. Publish them in your newsletter or on your website. Use them as testimonials. Include them in the evaluation reports and feedback to senior management. Some organisations I know have sent out press releases and got really good PR outside their organisation for mentoring success stories. And we've already talked about at the final event having a mentor and mentoree actually come up and tell their story. Now, for those of you, I mentioned also sending out a newsletter. I think that's a really good idea. You can have your own newsletter, but if that's a bit difficult for you, what I recommend is that you can either use the tips that I will tell you about later in the program, or you can put together your own mentoring newsletter. If it's hard for you to write articles, and I'm just showing a snapshot of my website here, and you can see up in the top left-hand corner there's a button to click on for my free newsletter. Now, if you click on that button and scroll down the page that comes up, you'll find that there's about 86 newsletters in the newsletter archive, and each one of those carries an article on mentoring, and you can sift through those and find the ones that are relevant to your particular participants, and you can actually use my articles in your newsletter. All I ask is that you acknowledge my authorship and note the source as a reference. So yeah, I think it's important that you're sending something out to people on a regular basis. The other sorts of things you can do is provide people with online resources such as ebooks, online tutorials, articles, checklists, and templates that they can use as tools. You can run workshops or webinars on career-related topics or skills development that complement mentoring or are specific to the needs of your target group. For some organisations, mentoring is part of their graduate program, so graduates receive a range of learning opportunities. Others link mentoring to a transition to management course or career development strategy. Now, some programs provide personality profiles or an instrument like Myers-Briggs type indicator or DISC or work styles questionnaires. So people get an insight into areas they want to develop. I also really like Marcus Buckingham's work with Donald Clifton. Their book is called Now Discover Your Strengths, and it has an online questionnaire for people to complete. So I've seen programs where people are actually given a copy of that book, and when you purchase that copy, there's details on how you can go online and as part of the purchase price of the book, utilise that questionnaire to identify career strengths. The other thing you can do is set up online communities where people can interact with other participants, upload documents to share, and I've actually got a couple of clients where I've done that for them, set up an exclusive online community only for participants in their program. It's kind of like a private Facebook. People can put their photos, their profiles up there and connect with each other via the website. There are blogs, there are discussion forums that they can start or join in, and we also put up their online resources such as podcasts or videos, which are increasingly popular. I think probably the most important item in your ongoing participant support is that go-to person, your internal program coordinator who's available to answer questions and provide advice should they need it. So again, going to pause and invite your comments. Anyone who's doing any of those sorts of support activities in their programs, love to hear from you now. Pop your hand up or type in and I will share. What are you doing in this field of ongoing participant support? Okay, perhaps we've covered most of the ongoing support that people are doing. I'll have a look at the questions or comments coming in just a moment, but I will continue on. Because I think the other thing we really need to focus on, so I've really talked about structuring your program, providing support, and now I want to talk for a little bit about the participants themselves. And I really feel that mentoring is a unique relationship, but one thing it has in common with any other relationship is that it doesn't work unless people are willing and active participants. Mentors and mentorees need ways to maintain their own enthusiasm. So here are some of the things I think you need to help your participants to do for themselves. I think you need to equip them with what I've labelled the essential skills for engagement, and they include a sense of purpose, value, and achievement. And Grant Birkinshaw, you were talking about this in your comments earlier. And I guess you could argue when I'm saying a sense of purpose, value and achievement, a sense isn't a skill, but I certainly believe there are skills you need to create a sense of purpose, value and achievement. The other area is helping them stay connected with each other. The skill of giving and receiving feedback, how to be really present in a conversation, asking good questions, and of course, last but most definitely not least, their listening skills are really critical. Now, before I go on and talk about each one of these, I'm seeing a comment coming in I've got a comment from Grant who says, we provide online resources including training. Great. And Katrina, who's saying regular networking sessions for mentees as well as one of the mentors, a bit of a lunch and learn. Yeah, I think that's a good strategy too. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so let's have a look now at these skills for engagement. I think they're absolutely essential. Now, one of the things I'm getting people to do these days is create what I've called a mentoring manifesto. So this is when pairs first get together. And according to Wikipedia, a manifesto is a public declaration of intentions, opinions, objectives, or motives. So get those mentoring pairs to actually discuss. I like to do this in a workshop setting because their enthusiasm and what they share actually rubs off on each other, get a real enthusiasm going. So that public declaration, get them to discuss why mentoring is important specifically to them, what they want to achieve, and how it will benefit them both. And I've said this so many times before, but I'll risk saying it again. It's my opinion that mentors get as much out of mentoring as do the people they mentor. Now, while most mentors volunteer for altruistic reasons, and we must acknowledge and thank them for that and constantly reward them for that, nevertheless, I believe there are benefits, and if we can make those explicit, I think that will help keep them engaged. So when you've got these pairs together writing this mentoring manifesto, have them establish an overarching goal that's meaningful to them and list ways mentoring will help them move towards it. Writing this statement of purpose, expectations and actions builds their commitment. It sets their intention to achieve outcomes and can be highly motivating because they have explicit reasons for being involved. Now, they don't have to share that with you, though you might choose to find some way to set that up so they do. And if they share it with you, then you can go back to them with a reminder. If you don't have that information, their manifesto might not be public. Maybe it's just between the two of them, and that's fine too, and we'd respect privacy and confidentiality. But you can certainly go back and remind them to refer back to that original contract, agreement, manifesto, whatever you want to call it, that statement of intention and expectations and benefits. This next one, I'm getting more and more emphatic in my workshops that people stay connected. I tell them it's just simply not good enough to let mentoring fizzle out. Okay, mentoring isn't till death do us part, and if it's not working, there should be the option of opting out or an exit strategy, and they need to be comfortable with that, but you're going to need to help them. But it's not good enough simply to let it fizzle out. I tell people, look, it's downright rude and unprofessional to do that. So make sure that they're scheduling in regular meetings, whether, and again, I tell them a minimum of monthly contact, perhaps more frequently when they're beginning, or you might specify in your guidelines, in your program guidelines, they're going to meet every second week or every 3 weeks or even once a week. Whatever the agreement is, get them to schedule it in their diaries, in their organisers. Once things are in there, they tend to work around them more easily. I also think that you should teach them some etiquette. I usually say the mentoree, the person being mentored, the protege or the mentee, whatever you call those people, participants, they should be driving this and they should understand the etiquette. Yes, the appointments are scheduled in both diaries, but the mentoree needs to confirm appointments, depending on how far out they are, a week ahead, and certainly within 24 hours, a confirmation. It's also useful if the mentoree is setting an agenda. Now, it doesn't have to get bogged down in a lot of written stuff, but what it does need is at least some dot points or some questions that they're actually going to discuss. Mentors find that that makes them feel worthwhile, and it also gives them, obviously, a heads up about what sort of content the conversation will cover. And again, on this staying connected and scheduling, I think this is a really good idea. It was suggested to me by a client, and I've really taken it up and suggested it to others, to actually get them to schedule in a review meeting for themselves where they will either commit to continue or decide to opt out. So the other skill that one of the other skills I talked about was this idea of giving and receiving feedback. And more I'm using this metaphor of the wind in the sails. Positive feedback is like the wind in the sails. And both mentors and mentorees need that ongoing positive feedback, because just like that sailboat, if the wind drops, then it's not going to go too far. Likewise, you can see in that picture there's a rudder as well. So they not only need positive feedback, they also need, for want of a better term, negative or corrective feedback to keep them on course as well. I suggest that you get mentors and mentorees into the habit of giving positive and corrective feedback from the outset. Make it easy by creating a formula for feedback that they can use at the conclusion of every mentoring conversation. And you may have seen in my other material a mentoring meeting debrief, which encourages participants to tell each other what they feel they've achieved in terms of outcomes, what they valued in particular or found challenging in a particular mentoring conversation. So there's the positive feedback, what they valued. There's the corrective feedback, telling each other what was difficult or challenging so that they can correct it for next time. Also to talk about what they learned, did they gain any insights, and most importantly, what they will action, what they will do. A mentoring conversation should never finish without the mentoree writing down the actions they will take before the next meeting. So if you teach them this debriefing process from the outset, if you give them a formula like this and get them doing it, it feels quite awkward at first, but it becomes easier and less awkward as it becomes a habit. So the other skill, talking briefly, is about being present. And what I mean by that is being present creates a more meaningful conversation because people give their full attention. Being present means stilling the mind, opening all your senses and being totally receptive to communication. Initially suspending judgment and postponing any analysis until you fully understand what the issue or the question is. This is not an easy thing to learn, but it's one that really takes practice. I do find that when mentors learn and use a simple format, once again, this is from my previous work, most of you will have seen this, or you can find it in a newsletter or article that I've written previously. The mentoring conversation allows people to stay focused and not worry about what they should say or do next. And people tell me they can easily retain these questions. Where am I now? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? So that they can then frame up questions they're actually going to ask. And of course, this is the real skill, asking those good questions, because mentoring is not a superficial conversation. Good questions are those that cause a person to think deeply. The conversation is an exploratory process in which both parties gain understanding of the topic they are discussing, and questions are asked to elicit thoughts and feelings, not just facts. I get mentors to generate thought-provoking questions during their workshop, and in fact I listed a few of those in the last newsletter that went out. And the final skill is that of listening. Undoubtedly the greatest skill in mentoring is listening. It's something most of us know we could do better, so I suggest you build in some listening skills into your mentor training. All of these essential skills for engagement require practice, but the rewards are great. They build strengths that will enhance mentoring and all communication and relationships. Now, you've been listening for quite a while, listening intently, and that's hard work. So I'm going to pause for a moment and going to invite your final comments or questions. You can type them in or raise your hand. So I'm just going to check. I'm seeing some questions or comments. Okay, going to read quite a few. Okay. So this is from Grant. We do this with a mentoring plan. However, it is often the case that the client only has a very high level idea of what they might gain from the mentoring. So Grant's talking about that idea of the mentoring manifesto, some sort of plan from the beginning. So only having a high level. Yeah, now that's an important point that that Grant's raised. I suggest that when people start mentoring, they often don't know exactly what they're going to get out of it. They kind of have general expectations. And so, again, this is another reason why they need to review them. They're not cast in stone, and people can review and modify those. Grant's saying too, we have a mutual expectations document that outlines the way they will interact. Okay, good. Now another one, no fault divorce, Patty. I think this is Patty saying, we have a no fault divorce policy if they need to exit out of the relationship. Thank the partner for stepping in the first place. That was the valuable part. Even if it didn't work out, no one is at fault, just didn't work out. Okay. And you can handle that in a fairly fun way in your initial training, can't you? Just no fault divorce. Okay, so Kate, what tips do you have for matching two mentors with a small group, i.e. what pitfalls to avoid? Okay, I'm kind of running out of time on this one, Caitlin, but we might talk offline after the end of the seminar about that one. Okay, I'll leave that one up there to talk about shortly. Okay, so we've got just a few more minutes, so going to kind of wrap this up. We've been talking about maintaining momentum, and we talked about the importance of having a program structure, having that, in fact, infrastructure that really supports people, because mentoring isn't a standalone activity. It's not a magic bullet or a quick fix. Mentoring can transform people. It's a strategy that can produce extraordinary outcomes for individuals and significant results that contribute to the bottom line for organisations. But it's definitely not set and forget. Like any strategy, it must be planned, implemented and nurtured. So developing a sound program structure is a first step. You also need that communication strategy, two-way communication, getting messages out there and listening to people as well. You need to provide ongoing support for your participants and help those participants learn the essential skills of engagement. So I hope you've gained something useful from today, from the time we've spent together. They say knowledge is power, but I believe it's what you do with knowledge that's powerful. So I want you to take a moment before you finish up with this webinar to actually write down a note for yourself. What will you do as a result of what was spoken about today? And as promised, before we finish up, I just want to tell you about a special offer I had that will add value for you in your mentoring program. So one of the things that I've mentioned is the mentoring tips, and what these are one-page tools, techniques and motivational tips that actually add value to people. They top up your training, remind people and motivate them. There are 2 volumes, each of 12 tips, and the price for those is $220 per volume. You can purchase both volumes, 1 and 2, so that's 24 tips. So you could send out a tip every second week for 12 months, and the price at the moment for you is $390 for both sets, so you save $50. And our bonus, until the 30th of July, if you make any purchase from our range, you'll get a set of 12 postcards, which are also extremely useful for sending out to people just to maintain contact with them. So until 30th of June, you'll get 12 free postcards with any purchase. By the way, if you're outside of Australia, the prices you're seeing on the screen and on the website are actually 10% less for you, because we have a thing called the GST. It's a domestic tax that doesn't apply to you. So take 10% off. That will happen automatically if you order online. So if you're interested in anything that I've spoken about today and want some help with that, you can phone me. The phone number's coming up on your screen now, or it's probably easier to email me. If you'd like to order the tips, just email me and I will send you an order form. So that brings us to the close of our mentoring webinar today. I'd love to know that you're actually writing down your actions from today, and you can type those in if you like to. I'm going to actually stop the recording